So Natalie, just tell me a little bit about yourself as a coach.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's lovely to see you here outside of our other online circle. So I got into coaching kind of by default, to be honest, because I was a teacher for many, many years. And then that started trickling into working with people, mostly holistic wellness practitioners. And I started helping them with their communication, their content, basically. And in that process of helping people refine their voice, refine what they wanted to say about their work, I realized that there was a whole lot of other things that weren't really in place for that person to step up and grow their business, basically. So what I do is I basically work with women. A lot of them are holistic women that have some type of maybe spiritual brand or background that want to go into business in a way that feels, one, more tailored to who they are as a person, and two, I really gear women to work with where they're ultimately going with their business, because that's another thing, is like everybody has very different goals in life. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I bring women back to. Let's figure out where you want to go, how you're built, and how we can create this so that it works with who you are.
I really like the meaning behind that, right? And that we all need some direction and we all need to come back to the self as we decide how we want to move forward. So tell me more about how you ended up here. What did you do before you got into coaching and how did that transition happen?
So I was a yoga teacher full time for 13 years. So as a yoga teacher, you really develop these skills that you don't really realize you develop. It's part of teaching. And that is often reading people's well-being, reading the things their bodies are telling you, reading the things that they're showing you through their communication. So it's this combination of, when I'm working with somebody, what am I picking up from this person? Because generally I'm finding that the reason I started working with women in particular is they don't approach business like men. Like, we're not wired like men. And so when all these business type practices and strategies were applied to a woman's psyche, psychology, energy levels, emotional cycles, even hormonal cycles, it just wasn't really working. And the women that were thriving on that type of strategy were often burning out. So that was kind of like the beginning of my transition from teaching yoga. I slowly started working as a copywriter and VA behind the scenes of the computer, basically. And that's when I started to see there was all these issues with my clients that I could see as a teacher. And yet I wasn't being paid, to kind of like get in there and talk to them about it. And that's when I realized, like, I feel that there's this huge capacity in people to create whatever their vision is. Because I don't really think of business as like a storefront, an exchange, a consumer's, it's much bigger than that. It's kind of like, what are you offering? You're offering a service, and you're inviting people into your community, and you're exchanging something, and you want to leave them better off. And I think that a lot of women, when they go into their workplace trying to have this very mental objective, it leaves behind all that person's real strengths, right? And real kind of like enthusiasm, because they go straight up here. And we all know that I don't think that women thrive when they're, for lack of a better word, constantly in their mental, intellectual side. So yeah, that's kind of what led me to realizing I need to offer some different packages and some different aspects to how I'm supporting clients, and realized that it's really the women that I can see needing to do things differently.
And that's really
Yeah.
important, right? When you're noticing a gap and you see, hey, I have the ability to fill this, right? And that there's a clear gap in the way that things are done, and we can change our expectations and our mindset to be able to get things done more effectively for each person, right? What are some of the ways that you help women come back to themselves and learn to operate better from a business standpoint outside of the masculine structure that we currently have?
The first thing I do, because all of this came at me really fast, it was very much like eye-opening, because I wasn't really, like I said, I wasn't really planning to be a coach. But I'm a teacher, built-in teacher, and when I see there's a need for something to be learned or for me to step up and teach or communicate, I do it. And the first thing that I realized, and sometimes men actually need this as well, it's clarity. So what I find a lot of women in business have, ton of enthusiasm, ton of ideas, but it's kind of like a woman's brain, you know, like it's going in all directions. They are often so inspired, especially if they're kind of like really into their business or starting their business, but there's a lack of like clear directional focus because there's just a couple of different ways we could go, right? It's like different streets we could drive down. And so the first thing that I will do is, before I even ask them about those things, those ideas, is ask them what they want, you know, like, because we've been sold in our society to think that like success is a ton of money and time freedom, and you know, we've been told that we all should be aiming at the same thing, whereas, you know, some women really want to work. They don't want to be automating everything and not dealing with their clients, and some women realize they want to be a stay-at-home mom when they're late 30s. Like, it's very individual. So that's the first thing that I'll do, is be like, how would you like to interact with your business, first of all? Like, what role would you like to be in? And then let's look at what you've got on the table. And I will hear pretty quickly which one I think is strongest. One, I have a marketing background now after I've done this for a while, but two, like, I'll hear that woman's energy. Like, if she's excited about it, that holds something, right? It means something. So yeah, it kind of is a combination of getting clear about who I'm working with, like where are they aiming? And then the next one is looking at everything they've built, because most women that I work with are very intelligent, emotionally intelligent, intellectually intelligent, but it's like all of us, we can't always see when we're in something how it's actually going to be received by their audience. So that's where I sit back and I'm kind of like, okay, well, you know, I see a niche here, I see you're passionate there, let's do that one first, and that offers second. So it's kind of this, like, it is a bit of an intuitive feedback. I'm kind of like a mirror. But it starts with really leaning into, like, who is this person I'm working with? Like, what are they passionate about? Because I'm not going to tell them to build a business on something they're not passionate about, you know? So that's kind of the first step, for sure.
You talk about that passion a lot, right? And that we need to be aligned with our values to align with that passion to make sure that we're going in a direction that's actually sustainable for us. So it's just about understanding what the goals are, why they're so important. And what I'm hearing is, what you're speaking about is that the women come in and they have so much creativity and so much excitement that they're a little bit all over the place. And that's just what you expect when you talk about the very traditional gender roles of women are the creativity. They are the excitement. And it's beautiful that they bring that to the table. And men are seen as the more structure side of things. That's just the way it is. That's okay.
Yeah.
So it's just allowing them to have that balance in themselves of have the excitement, have the passion, have the idea, have the vision, but also find which way they need to be pointed to get there, right?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because having a background in yoga, like, you actually study and observe the body quite closely. So, like, I could even break down why women are like that hormonally and why men have a different way of experiencing focus, right? Because of the way you guys are wired. And that is something that's not really talked about in business. And this is, you know, becoming a little bit more mainstream, where women are saying, like, let's break away from this, like, boss babe image of, like, $1 million days. And, like, that is not who I'm working with. I'm helping women really tap into, what are you here to do? Like, and I think on the masculine side, or let's say, like, just in general, the business conversations that are out there has a lot to do with, like, words like purpose or legacy. And really that's kind of what I'm helping that woman do, but it's not necessarily about what they're putting out there. It's like, every woman has a very kind of intricate wiring. And what we've seen over the last 15 years is that there's so much awareness around what happens if you're making decisions, especially as a woman, because I've studied women's bodies, the rate of autoimmune disease, the rate of depression, the rate of burnout, if you're not doing something you love. So it's not just a woo-woo privilege to pursue your passion. It's like you can take that higher paycheck and spend your days and years working for something you're medium about. That's okay if you like. But it's not necessarily going to serve you forever in the long run if you're constantly doing something that isn't completely, like you said, in alignment with what you actually want to be doing. And I'd say the same about men too, right? It slowly wears away at your happiness, your confidence, your satisfaction in life. And if it's wearing away at that, it's going to be wearing away at other areas of your life, your marriage or whatever your health, you know? So I actually see helping people pursue something they love is like much more powerful than just a Northwest privilege to do, you know, think outside the box. It's supporting your overall well-being.
Absolutely. And like my own story relating to that, before getting into coaching, I did 10 years in oil and gas, right? I was a production operations manager. And it was stuff that I was excellent at, the way that my brain is wired for structure and management, time management, organization. Like these are things I'm very good at. It was stuff that I was very good at keeping track of. But year after year after year of getting further and further and further away from my purpose and my joy and wanting to help people, wanting to share my passion for self-development and growth compared to being in my surrounding of working in oil and gas. Those guys run on caffeine, nicotine, and hatred. And is that
right? I get it.
Is that the type of environment that you want to be in every single day,
Yeah.
right? So let's talk about environment a little bit. What do you do to create the environment for yourself to continuously be successful?
Oh, that's a big one. So first of all, I think it takes a certain number of years to really get to know who you are. Because you can fight against it, like you said, 10 years in oil and gas. I've done many different things and put myself in different environments. I know what best helps me thrive as a person, and one of them is freedom. I've recently, last year, tried to be, was offered a lot of money to be an employee, and I really quickly realized how that doesn't work with my current makeup, because it was disempowering, disorganized. I was spending a lot of time, not even on the job I was hired for, you know, so I continuously come back to when I'm working with somebody and how I structure my day, it's got to be the right amount of structure that I can get done what I need, but flexible enough that I can flow with life. Because there's nothing more stressful than feeling as a business, like you're going to be running your own business as an entrepreneur, right? There's nothing more stressful than overworking, all the time feeling like you need to be doing things and you're not getting them done, right? So you have to have this. It's almost like you need to parent yourself because you are the boss. You need to have clear parameters of what's realistic for today and what I can prioritize and put off into other days. So you do have to develop this relationship with like order of priority. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is because I'm a parent, I always need to let myself rest if I need to rest. You know, so sometimes I'll be at the end of my day and I'll be like, well, I could get ahead on something. And my body's just saying like, I'm tired. And this is something that I feel many people don't understand about business. We think about business in terms of productivity still, which is in some degrees makes sense, right? Makes sense. But the reality, which we realized in COVID, is people are so much more productive when they are in that zone, right? So if you're not in that zone and you're trying to push forward a project or push forward whatever type of work you're creating, it's not going to go that smoothly. It's not going to be the highest level of quality that you can offer, especially when you're working with other people. So I have a pretty like dialed in, I guess, awareness of like, how much can I take on in a week? How much can I book? How much can I commit to outside of my work? Like, I do not scatter my energy all over the place because, and I think I learned this through teaching as well, like, I can't show up for people if I'm scattered, you know, if I'm tired, if I'm coming basically from a more forceful place. I need to be coming from that place of like, how is my well-being? Are my basics tended to? Do I feel focused? Do I feel on? Am I ready for this? Have I prepared? You know, and this also sounds a little bit like, maybe like privileged, because we've been taught that work needs to be, you're on and you're paid and there's like go, you know. This is also bullshit though, because we've only been taught that to work for other people. Right?
Absolutely.
So when you step into the role, yeah, so this is something you need to be able to break a few boxes apart, and sometimes you need to sit and understand how uncomfortable it feels to walk away from those boxes, right? Because many people value themselves or perceive themselves as hardworking or good at what they do professionally, but that's by choice. You've defined that. You could say I'm an amazing person because I have a brilliant marriage too, but society has told us if we do something well, if we make a career, we've succeeded, you know? And personally, I think that if you're someone who's created a brilliant career, but you're not thriving, that's not success, you know? That's totally off balance.
Right.
And will eventually get to you, you know? So it really comes back to understanding that person's design. Like, is this woman or man really wanting to work in person? Do they prefer being behind the scenes? How much is the right amount of work? You know what I'm saying? Like, because we're all designed differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's got to come from that place of self and knowing oneself, right? And you even mentioned a little bit that it took you some years of exploring to understand what really worked for you, right? Myself,
Yeah.
I left my job in oil and gas about a year and 4 months ago, and it has taken me up until about now to really figure out a schedule and a time frame that works for me as a person, and that I used to work a bunch of hours, maintain a gym routine, and do different things like that. And they were things I was capable of doing, but it was like you're talking about, of like, you need to be on all the time, work all the time, you've got to have the right output. And it was a job where I just needed to show up and get things done, right? Versus here, coming from an intellectual standpoint and a creative standpoint of, I need to think about marketing in new ways, I need to think about outreach in new ways, I need to be able to have the time, space, and energy to sit here and have in-depth intellectual conversations on a regular basis. And it's taken a lot longer than I would have liked to stabilize some of that for myself. So it's, you have to learn that from the self. You have to help other people learn that as well. And I think that it's really interesting to hear you speak, because I use an entirely different vocabulary and an entirely different structure, but it sounds like you're talking a lot about just getting people back to the place of self, right? Understanding who they are as a person, getting them really strong in that relationship so that they can build out their fundamentals of what they want their business to be based off of this relationship with the self, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, my background is coming from a more spiritual, energetic way of working with people, so it's inevitable that that comes in. Now, I don't just start talking like a yoga teacher, but that is a lot of my skill set. I don't think I've actually ever read a business book. That's how I'm wired. But I learned very quickly through environments and having worked with enough people and understanding the mindset of our current business paradigm. I even feel like what I'm talking about and why I'm working with women is also applicable with men. But the thing is, when I work with men, I have to go through a different filter because I'm not a man, and I know that man is wired for more, usually, this is a generalization, but practicality, structure, that it still suits them. It still serves them for some you know, part of how you're wired. And it does for women too. But the thing that I think that's out of balance for a lot of people is we live in a world where many women are trying to reclaim this part of themselves that they're not able to sustain being in that masculine thinking frame, pushing, driving, goal-oriented self. It's not really where we don't love it. We love nurture, creativity, reorganization. You know what I mean? It's much more fluid. Even my hands are doing this. When I find that women are driven by goals, money, like the structured stuff, they're usually not very tapped into that other side of themselves, right? It's almost like they have some personal work to do. Does that woman relax? Is she deeply nourished by other areas of her life? Or is she just assuming that this, success she's after gives her a sense of validation, to be honest? And I'd say the same about men, but it's very different, right? Because we in society have always said we revere men that succeed. And to be honest, there's still a large part of us that we do, It's great if you can provide and create your goals and see them through. Like, that's a good quality, right? But what I'm after and what I teach is I'm after changing how women go about it, right? Because what I've seen, and I didn't even realize, but many of the years that I was teaching yoga were very affluent city people, midlife city people, usually parents, 2 careers in the house, that type of thing. And all of them, walking them through that process of deep relaxation, had to remove every single role. It's just extensive, the amount of things that we take on to just allow ourselves to relax. And so when we're building these businesses, if we go about it in a way that's like pressure, stress, deadlines, quarters, it's not really how any of us are. Well, men tend to like a little bit more that kind of, get up and go. But women can often, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, women can often find that they work like that for a while, but it has to have more, has to have inspiration, has to have, usually I find women find a lot of purpose and connection, like with their clients, and they get, we all do as coaches, like you get inspiration, you have a new idea for maybe an offer, you learn something from that last client. It's just got to have a different bunch of ingredients, I think, to really sustain, because many people burn out in this industry.
Yeah, and I think, so the point here, right, is to talk about what makes us all unique. And I think that it's really interesting, the things that you're saying right now, in that I work with both men and women. And I think that the women that I work with are almost the counter opposite of the women that you work with, and that they're really locked into that creativity side, and they need more of the structure, routine, which makes sense, right? Because I teach value-based decision making and boundary setting, goal setting, these kinds of things. So they've got that space, they've leaned into that, they've got alignment in the creativity. Then they just need to learn an entirely different framework, versus it sounds like for you with your intuition-based coaching, it's getting people away from the structure, and that they already know that, they've already got that, but let's allow the creativity, let's allow the exploration, and let's allow all of that to blossom within themselves. Is that right?
I work with both, but yes, I know exactly what you're saying. So sometimes when I work with women that say have the more holistic, say they're a nutritionalist, they can be really strong in what they offer, but like you said, they didn't go to business school, they don't have the structures or the knowledge. So we come in, and again, we create almost like the sides of a bank. So the way that I usually help women is to just prioritize, get support if they don't know how to do that role, because I really think that too many people in business try and do it all. You probably find this too, but they're like, it's exhausting to try and do everything for business,
Yep.
I just see both sides, but I know what you mean. I do actually end up being the masculine for a lot of businesses, because my brain is a combination of intuition and intellect, and they have to work together. But I do feel that like what you're doing for women is really, one, it's almost like you're you're there as a support for their nervous system as well. You're like, okay, I got this, I got some ideas, I've got some ways that we can help you bring some clarity. It's all about clarity. Like, let's create ways that this can thrive without you being all over the, you know what I mean? We need to give it a direction. So I think it sounds like we really do offer similar things. It's just we speak about it a little differently, you know?
And do you have, so we all have like our proverbial tool basket, right? And that we have the trainings, we've learned different modalities, but do you have a couple tools that are your go-to on a regular basis of like an exercise that you use all the time, ideas that you bring up all the time? Are there frameworks that you use consistently, anything like that?
I do. I did realize that I studied astrology for about 13 years now. So if someone is open and into that, I will look at pretty much how they're built. And I will look at the speed of which they work. I will look at what makes them inspired. I'll look at their midheaven, if you know astrology speak, which is like how you shine. I'll look at their money houses. So I will definitely look at like someone's background. But the other thing that I usually work with is money, like money beliefs, money mindsets. So I will usually, when I hear someone speaking pretty early on in their business, I can tell where they're at with that relationship. For instance, I realized really early on that a lot of women had trouble talking about money. And a lot of women had trouble asking for what they were worth. Like, asking the dollar value that they feel their services are worth. And say you do work for a client and people would struggle to send that invoice, or if somebody's late on a payment. So I went down this whole other path that I never would have seen coming, diving into money and psychology of money with women in particular. And I feel like maybe you can relate to this, but men have a very different kind of like drive, focus, you know, like it kind of serves a purpose for you to lock in. And women, I feel like, need to create a different way of seeing it so that it's not about the money, right? Because when we get so focused on something, we tend to lose a lot of the other qualities about why we're even doing this. And I've realized that so many people in today's world are truly living in a place of like scarcity, no matter what's happening in their bank account. So that's the other thing that I dive into with women. It's like, okay, so how are we setting your business up? Clarity-wise, what are you offering? What feels good? What's going to set you on the right path? What are you suited to? Where do you want to go? Second one is, let's look at this relationship. How are you literally set up on your back end, in your services, how you speak to people about that it's an exchange. It's not just a dollar amount. It's not just a number. It's exchange, right? So I help them price themselves usually higher than they've usually been pricing, because I look at how many years have you done this? Who are you aiming at, you know? And then we find that number. And if I say, Sean, you're going to charge 400 USD for a session, your body will automatically be yes or no. And if it's a no, we'll change the number, right? So
Absolutely.
there's this, we'll do this in depth. It's a lot to do, to be honest, with self-worth and the confidence of that person and how that person feels even talking about what they do. So sometimes there's work to be done there too.
But yeah, circling that back into money and that money mindset, so many people need so much work in that mindset, right? I remember like starting out as a new coach when I was in coaching school in Singapore, and somebody said to me, or they were like, we were in the room talking, and the guy said something about, oh, what would you charge for your services? And it was like, he said $400 an hour, and to me that was heart attack statement of like $400 an hour versus like that's what some of these rates are, especially when you get into coaching on the corporate side of things and you've been doing it for years versus me as a brand new personal development coach who had just been starting to form ideas. That was an unfathomable number, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the equation that I've built in because I realized I had been through a process with my teaching career that I had a relationship with my services, that it wasn't about money. But after enough years, and I had a child, it had to reflect my experience. It had to. Now that's part of why the yoga industry is a completely other conversation, but we need to look at how many years have you done this? What have you put into this? Like, have you done courses? Have you gotten specific, trainings, which makes you, more multifaceted to work in different ways with people? And to be honest, what else do you have, like transferable skills that you're bringing into this role, right? So many people in midlife come from like the corporate background and then go into holistic services, where I realized I've been like 20 years of working with people. I was like, what am I doing? Am I a coach? And then I was like, I've always been a coach. I've always been a teacher. I've always been that person that can work with what you're not telling me because I can see it. So I help people do this kind of process, right? And see exactly where they're at and where they'd like to go. And then that also helps you figure out who you're supposed to work with. Are you supposed to work with corporate businesses that are 400 people strong? No. But are you supposed to work with maybe independent businesses that are a couple years in? You've got these skill sets that you can step in and offer, right? So it's like, it's useful in many ways, not just for pricing, but for who you want to market to, who you're supposed to work with for now, right? As you get more experience. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And let's talk about that just a little bit more, in that the word that I use there for who you're supposed to be talking to is your avatar. What is the avatar that you specifically seek out? It sounds like women who are starting businesses. Does it get more specific than that?
I actually would say not women who have just started businesses, because then I do a lot of building, which is not necessarily, like I could. But I work with women who are kind of a few years into their business and know they want to grow. So it's kind of like taking them after they've put in some groundwork so they know how different structures work. So I'm not just teaching them the basics. And then we look at like, how could this flow better? Like if you want to grow. So I'm really about like helping that woman step into that next version of a bigger audience, speaking to people, being more in the public eye. Once she's kind of had an idea and process, like probably trying a few things, and being closer to like what she really wants to be doing next, but she just doesn't really know how to get there. So that's why I think about the word expansion comes up often. I work with like brands that are ready for bigger impact or expansion in their community, and how to do that in a way that doesn't deplete that person. So that's basically who my avatar is.
And let's talk just a little bit about how you've ended up in this place, right? How many years have you been coaching? How long did it take you to refine down to the point that you're presently at?
Well, I started doing online work 7 years ago. So that was pretty much the beginning of me starting to really dive into markets and marketability and optimization and SEO and how people think and how to write a good copy, like a website page or a landing page. And that really wasn't like, I would do it because I'm pretty quick at this stuff, but it was more about like, okay, the psychology of people. That's what I was taking in, because that's how my brain works. And then that moved me into, when I had like more and more clients, I was then starting to realize, well, they've read the books and they've been to the masterminds, but then the energetics is not there. This person is aiming in a direction that like I don't see them succeeding in. So I kind of had this like inner, I guess, awareness when I was working with somebody, that they would say to me, Natalie, I want to build this. And I'd be like, I don't see that for you. So it was kind of hard to explain, but their energy wasn't matching their words. And we all know what that feels like.
Right.
So then I started to dive into like understanding strategies that are out there. So I've seen a lot of people's work. I've seen what is recommended, things like consistency and outreach and this way of doing your business. And to be honest, I encourage people to scrap most of that until they know what they're really after. Because too many people right now in the world of business are listening to other people without actually knowing clearly where they want to go. Does that make sense? So yeah, you can be following that amazing, inspirational person on Instagram, but that doesn't mean their path is yours. You know?
Yeah, the example that I use for that all the time is, are you familiar with Alex Hermosi?
No, who's this?
Alex Hermosi is a very well-known, how to even describe him? I guess you could call him an influencer. He's a major business guy, and he has some incredible advice out there. And his whole methodology is the hyper-masculine, do nothing else but work and grind until you die, right? And it's when you listen to him speak, it all sounds so clear, so cut and dry, and so that's exactly what I need to be doing, but it's that advice just doesn't fit me as a person. It makes me absolutely miserable, and that I as a person need balance, right? I have the masculinity, I have the structure, but I also need the creativity. I need to have time to pursue things that I'm passionate about. I need to move my body. I need to do flow arts. I need to have social structure. If I just try and sit around and work for hours and hours a day and do nothing else, I'm burnt out, uninspired, not making any actual progress, just becoming frustrated, right? So you have to be really careful with all the advice in the world out there of whether it's good advice or not for that person doesn't mean that it's good advice for you, right? And it sounds like you do a lot of just tapping into and helping people clear out the noise of things that they have heard that work for other people and finding things that work for them and leaning into that, right?
Well, here's in a nutshell why I think that men like that do well in business. In the world of consumerism, we lean into people who are sure. Now, that doesn't always mean they're right. Right? But we like things that are clear, easy to understand. Everything I've just been talking to you about is a little more complex. But if I was to speak in masculine talk and write about a book, a business, I would say first, know your direction. And I'd write a chapter about knowing your true north or knowing your compass, knowing what you're aiming for. And then I would write the next chapter, get clear with what inspires you. Because I don't support anybody building something they don't actually want to build, like I said. And the third one is like, what skills are you working with? Like, if you know your direction, you've cleared the clutter, you've chosen the one that feels the most like the fit that you want to pursue or the package or whatever it is in the moment. And then you need to look at what you're actually coming in with. Like, do you have 2 newborn kids? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you not like public speaking? So then that is going to tell me, how do we build the actual structure for your strategy? Do we reach out to podcasts if you hate public speaking? No. So
absolutely.
You know what I mean? So in the speak of business, I think people like this are enticing because they're easy to follow and they make sense and they're very confident. And I kind of feel part of my job is to leave my clients more confident in themselves, not following. There's no way I could teach someone to coach like me because I have too many years of things and qualities and doing different skill sets with people.
Sure.
Now I can tell you about my business acumen, but that's not really what makes me the best coach. What makes me the best coach is that I can read people and I can feel, is that maybe for you this guy's strategy would work and that I'd support it, But generally speaking, for a mom of 3 kids, she's going to need a different strategy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that we're coming to a place where COVID has actually given us more than a few gifts. Anybody listening that's lost anybody, that's, still it is a big turning point in history. But it's really made us examine how we spend our time and energy. And it's gotten us to really think about our priorities and what we were taught in school. I'm 40. I'm not interested in retiring when I'm 65, like I plan on living now as well and finding out ways to work that I love, not that I'm being told I should do, you know?
Right, it's about building that life that's fulfilling every single day. And that, yeah, for me as well, I'm not interested in working in a job that I hate until I'm 65 and then hopefully
No.
living maybe 20 years having all the best of my life behind me, right? It's about building a life
Yeah,
where I can be satisfied and fulfilled every single day. And I think that's the same for everybody who's gone down this path, right? In that
completely.
instead of finding a job that just pays enough, it's if I had all of the money in the world and could do anything that I wanted, what would that be? And how do I turn
Mhm.
that into my job and turn that into my everyday life and turn that into my reality? And for me, this is it. I would love to spend the rest of my life having conversations like this, coaching people,
Mhm.
connecting with other coaches, and helping people grow. Money aside,
Mhm.
that's what I want to be doing. So why wouldn't I build a business
Yeah,
based off of that?
completely. Yeah, and I mean, for me, same thing. I think it tailored into women because I see women have so much capacity and potential, but a lot of them are using the wrong strategy to try to grow. And they're using sometimes these strategies coming from an outside, sometimes male, frame. And I'm like, I don't see that working. Even the word, because I'm a nerd and I'm a word person, mastermind, like, if you don't have your intentions and your belief in yourself in order, you can be as smart as a whippet and you're still not necessarily going to succeed, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot more to this conversation, and I'd love to leave people feeling like super clear with my 1, 2, 3 step. But to build a business is a journey, and it's the coolest thing in my eyes because it gets to be your journey. And like a marriage, it's not what we think it is, this like linear, done, one step, we hope it goes well. And anybody who's teaching business like that, I don't, you know? We need to work with that person. We need to work with the growth of that person, right? Because if you're just starting out, I don't know very many people that have done really well with suddenly having 30,000 followers and the pressure that comes with that. Does that make sense? So you have to take into account that person's experience, their nervous system, their skill sets, their strengths, and like I said, most importantly, where do they even want to go? You know, because that's so unique.
So tell me a little bit more about where you're specifically at with your business and your strategy. What kind of outreach do you use?
Well, I've actually been, so when I created my business called Conscious Female Brands, that was 2022. And through that process of learning curve, I actually realized that one of my priorities was the connection with whoever I'm working with. And my strategy is all about smaller and intimate groups, people coming together, building the community. I started my podcast as a result, which is called Female Resonance. And I only bring people on who kind of have this more organic audience. And it's all about sharing resources. So people normally find me through teaching, someone they know, my Instagram page, or my podcast. And after watching like all these different ways of building a community, I realized that I'm built to want to have a conversation like we're having. Like, I want to know what you're dealing with if I'm going to help you. So going too big, because I see a lot of women trying to say, I want to write a book, I want to be on a stage. And I'm like, that's fabulous. Maybe that'll happen. I'm open to it. But that's not my priority. My priority is a connection with who I'm speaking to and offering them something that is useful to them. So my strategy is kind of like to create this more compact community than just how many followers I have, so it's a specific strategy. Other people I help with that if they want to boom and grow and sell, and but that's not really what drives me at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So it sounds like you're a very connection-centered person in that you would really
Totally.
have a more intimate following and intimate gathering. And as long as for you, is there an enough? Is there an amount of customers that you want to have? Is there an amount of growth that you want to see? Or is it just maintaining this level of connection where you can make a real impact with the people that you connect with?
I think I realized that like I always get asked for consultations and sessions. So that's one side of what I do. And brand consultation, I will only take on about 3 a month. Um, but I am creating courses. So I've actually already created 3. And the next one that comes out is called Women and Money. And it speaks a lot to what we were already saying. Like, what are we carrying around these beliefs? What were we taught? Why were we taught it? How does it affect our sense of self? How does it make us feel safe? Why? So there's ways that people can work with me that aren't necessarily my in-person time, but I've realized over the last few years that that's still my priority. Like, I want to be able to give people my energy to a certain degree to access what comes up in the conversation, not just me automating everything, which you do need a certain degree of as well.
Yeah. So for you, what does the automation side look like? Just the classes that you presently have? What else?
No, the automation side is definitely going to be for my courses, right? Because I don't really need to be involved with that. I also have a course that's going to be coming out in it's already built, but a couple of months, called Chart Your Path. And this is the process that I actually went through for any holistic entrepreneur, so anybody that is the brand. So if you're a massage therapist, or you're a teacher, or you're a nutritionalist, or you're a physio, how to build your brand, because you've basically probably been taught like the body of work, but not necessarily how to run the business. And so I walk you through these specific steps on how to do that in a way that doesn't burn you out, that allows you to create basically the stamina when you're working with people to sustain that career. Because again, what I'm always working with is so many people struggle with burnout.
Right.
Yeah, so that's coming out in probably at the end of June, and Women and Money is coming out on 15th, so I'm excited.
Or is there anything more that you want to share before we start wrapping this down?
No, the only thing I think I'd like to say is like the reason that I love this work is because I'd love to see us change some of our current business beliefs. I'd love to see us do business differently, right? I think that we're still operating from this capitalist, I take, I get mentality in a lot of ways, and it's extremely limiting, and it continues to keep us stuck in like not enough scarcity mode. So for anybody listening, like I think that that's something that you need to watch as you build your business, is tend to your belief systems and why you're doing this, right? What are your drives?
Absolutely. A person with a strong why can withstand any how, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it might change. That's the other piece of advice that I would give people, is let yourself grow, right? And question what you've built and how. Not all the time, but periodically, because you're going to be growing in this process, right? Like I have. It's been a total evolution of like, you want to build what? Why? You know? And information will just come through, and then I need to sit with it, feel into it, decide what I want to say about it, you know? Because you really are the creator of whatever you're offering. So you can get advice from other people, but ultimately you're the one that has to decide if it resonates or not, you know?
And I think that your story goes to speak on just how much a person can change and grow over time, right? And that you started as a yoga teacher, and that was your primary focus for a long time. And now you're a business strategist coach in helping people clarify, understand their business, and choose directions to move forward. And that what you're doing
Yeah.
today probably isn't what you'll do 10 years from now. But the important part is that you start, that you get yourself moving, that you listen to yourself as you go along and allow that growth to happen naturally.
Ultimately, I think in the future, I would like to write books. I would like to write because that's the format that I feel allows people to kind of understand why I have these ideas, where they come from, you know. But there is this shift that I see happening in people and how they show up for work. And it just always reminds me of like the beauty that each of us is built differently for a reason. You know, like your purpose, your skill set is not mine, and mine is unique, you know. And if you can find yours and really hone into it and trust it and grow it, that's business.
Absolutely. It's about taking those unique experiences and growing them, right?
Totally.
So how can people connect with you? What's your Instagram handle? How do they get a hold of this podcast?
So my podcast is called Female Resonance. It's on Spotify. It will be on Apple soon. They just threw up a bunch of issues. And you can find me on Instagram on Conscious Female Brands. I'm on there. My website, same thing, consciousfemalebrands.com. And like I said, my course will be coming out middle of the month. But yeah, I'm very easy to connect to and look forward to anybody who's ready to be in this process of, it's always personal and professional growth.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me today, Natalie. I really appreciate this whole conversation that we just had. And yeah, I can't wait to connect with you more in the future.
Thank you for having me.